I'm Dr. Brian Samuel, Director of the Office of Equity and Diversity here at UTC, and it is my distinct pleasure to thank all of you for coming out today. Perhaps you had planned to clean the garage or go skydiving or do some other things with your break today, or the fact that students are not on campus, and we really appreciate the fact that you are spending it investing in the UTC community with us at Mock Forward, UTC's Inclusive Excellence Conference. We also want to thank the executive team, our college deans, and our departments for their sponsorship and support of this institutional initiative, bringing all of us together on one accord to talk about diversity and inclusion and a path forward for the UTC campus. We want to thank all the faculty, staff, students, and guests that are presenting today. We're offering 25 sessions today, and many of them are very, very enticing, and I can't wait I hope I get a chance at least to step in one or two of them, so we'll see how the day goes. A couple of them are closed, so if you recall the session with Deb Levine and one or two others are closed. So if you've registered for those, great. If not, then what we want to try to do is make sure that we give those presenters every opportunity to engage with the participants and respect that. There are 264 students, faculty, staff, council members, and community members that are registered for today's conference, and we're very, very happy that this was received very well by the UTC community. Some of us did not recall which sessions we registered for. And so, after probably about the 30th phone call asking Brian, I can't remember what session I registered for, it was recommended to me that we probably need to do something about that. And so if you'll look on the back of your name tags, all of your sessions are back there now. Hopefully you're not like me and you can't read it, but but if you can't, then there's someone, I hope, near you that should be able to help you see what sessions you are signed up for. And in your booklets, every one of you should have a booklet. The actual room location for that session should be in the booklet, okay? So you might have to look here to know where you're going, and then look in the booklet to know where you're going to. But if you do those two things, it will come together, I promise you. Coffee and snacks will be offered throughout the day, and there'll be two stations, one outside of the auditorium here. You should have seen it earlier on your way in, and then one outside of the Multicultural Center. Much of the sessions will be either in the Chattanooga rooms, A, B, and C, or upstairs on the third floor in that corridor, beginning with the Signal Mountain Room and heading north there, okay? At the conclusion of these sessions, we really want you to give us some good feedback. If there are opportunities for doing this better in the future, if there are opportunities for continuing these type of initiatives, tell us. If there are sessions that you would like to hear about or learn more about, or speakers that we could potentially invite, please tell us that too. So at the end of every session, if you would please give us some feedback, we really appreciate that. And then once more, Dr. Brown is going to give us our closing later today, and if you will do an overall evaluation of the day's activities, that would be great too. At 10:15, we're going to have a group photo, all right, and this will be tricky. It is time sensitive. In order to kind of stay on schedule, we got about 15 minutes, maybe 20 tops, to get everybody at the atrium, take a nice photo, and then get people going to their different sessions. So if you are so inclined, we invite all of you to participate in the campus photo for the conference. And now a couple of announcements, if you will. In continuation of our diversity efforts for this year, I'm pleased to announce that the Housing and Residence Life Department will be offering the Dear World, a storytelling portrait campaign on this campus on November the 16th in the Tennessee Room. And that will be a very big and good moment for us. And so if you get an opportunity to participate, please do so, and please look for further announcements about it. And also, in continuation of our efforts, each of you should have received a book or at least been offered a book, Between the World and Me, our first year reading for this year. And in spring 2018, excuse me, spring 2018, we will have a number of diversity dialogue sessions around this particular book. And we want to thank our faculty and others that will be facilitating these sessions in advance. And finally, I would be very remiss if I did not thank all the faculty, staff, students, departments that worked on this institution initiative to pull this together. And I mean, we worked, and I hope y'all recognize that. Everyone from our graphic services, our communications department, our radius people and enrollment services that helped us get registered and, give everybody messages and that kind of thing. It really was a team and institutional effort, and we want to thank everybody that helped bring it together. So without further ado, we want to bring forward our champion, our chancellor, Dr. Stephen Engel, to give us our opening remarks.
Thank you for being here. We had no idea what fall break would be in terms of attendance. Number of the faculty and students who are here. We know you had a choice. We appreciate you coming and participating. This is important, and today is not the end of a discussion, but it's a continuation of the dialogue on campus. There are a number of people from our community here. We're fortunate to have Ron Harris, who's going to give a talk immediately after me. And between our community, our campus, how do we provide the right environment for our campus to foster our students, their sense of who they are and who their fellow students are, who their colleagues will be. Diversity is something we need to cherish. It is something that allows us to, I think, appreciate where we are, where we've come from, and we take many things for granted based on how we were born and how we found our path in life. My father grew up on the Indian reservation, Apache Indian reservation. His dad was an Indian agent. He was the youngest of 6 boys. He had 4 older brothers and one his age. His brother and family were the only ones they spoke English with. In 8th grade, when he went into Phoenix to go to school, he said he had no idea how to relate to these people who were so different, because all his friends were Apache. How we're raised is an environment that once we move out of that, there's a big world out there. How do we interact with people? Sometimes it's moving to people who look more like you, but are very different just because of their background. This is an opportunity today to think of all of the elements of diversity and how this impacts our students and what is our responsibility as a university. So that's one thing I hope today we come out with, is a thought of how are we going to help this be an even better place for our students and our community. I want to thank Dr. Valerie Rutledge and Dr. Brian Samuel and their team. It's an incredible effort, as Dr. Samuels just said, to put this together. But let's give them a round of applause for organizing. This is a lot of work, and you never know what the turnout will be and if people think this is important. And I think that they were right on target with the audience that we could draw. So the official title of the conference, Moving Our Campus Forward, reflects on our ongoing pledge to foster an environment at UTC that's comfortable for everyone. Our students, faculty, staff, visitors, our community, the people surrounding this campus. One of the 4 goals of our strategic plan states that we embrace diversity and inclusion as a path to excellence and societal change. We're working to operationalize that. We need you to help us. We're going to try and track it better with some metrics. But what does that mean? How do we operationalize that and know that we're making progress? Diversity extends across many platforms: ethnicity, race, religion, gender, socioeconomic, and physical abilities, to name just a few. Each is addressed in the 23 presentations that are offered in today's conference. I hope that these topics will instill an understanding of the complexities of diversity and inclusion, while at the same time initiate a conversation on the intrinsic value of them in our society, not just at UTC, but throughout our community here in Chattanooga. How do we take these to our community, and how do we learn from our community? Over the course of today's conference, a number of speakers are going to provide insights. We hope this is relevant information. Discussing diversity in the classroom. How do we do that? The effects of socioeconomic diversity, the interconnected nature of race, class, and gender. These are just a few of the things that are going to be discussed in these sessions. I'm sure each of us will learn something in the mocks forward, and that will help in our personal lives and with our campus and our community. I do hope that we're better positioned to serve our students and understand where they've come from and where they're going. That we haven't all arrived here by the same path, but it's where we're going in the future that matters. We need to cherish our differences, our individuality, and our strengths. And I hope that today each of us will understand that we have it right in our strategic plan, that embracing diversity and inclusion is the path to excellence in societal change. And that today is one small step in a much broader scope of activities and things that you all are going to come up with ideas of, here's what we ought to be doing. So the common text and further discussions next year. What a powerful book. We can't lose that opportunity. There are a lot of other opportunities that each of you can think about. And I hope that you will be participatory throughout this year and in the future as we address diversity and inclusion here. So thank you. I look forward to a great day.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Engel. I have the distinct pleasure of knowing Mr. Ron Harris from a number of capacities around the diversity continuum. He and I are both members of Volkswagen North America Diversity Council, and we run in so many different circles that when I hear him converse about diversity and inclusion, he just inspires me, and I'm sure he will do the same for all of you. I am not reading his bio because you have it in the package that we've given you, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome my friend and a gentleman that I look up to give us our keynote address today, Mr. Ron Harris.
Good morning. It's not often that I hear the words, people look up to me. So thank you. I do have a friend who reminds me I have to look down at you to look up to you. But I'm certainly happy to be here today, and certainly I'd like to thank Dr. Engel and my friend, Dr. Samuel. I feel like I need no introduction simply because when I came in, everybody spoke to me by name, and so that made me nervous. But thank you so much. I think what you're doing today is incredibly important, and I thank you for allowing me to just spend a few moments with you with a few thoughts around where we are today and how those of us who consider ourselves diversity practitioners, how we can impact this big job that you have. What you're doing today and where you are today is incredibly important, not only as individuals, but as a university as well. There's a lot going on in our university today, and I think you will agree that we have a big job ahead of us. So I do applaud your efforts here today. Let me begin by introducing, where did she go? April? I want to introduce my boss, April Lomax. And April and I have the pleasure of working together. One of the things that we want to do first is premiere a video. This is the first time this video has been shown publicly. It's brand new, and it's an illustration of what we think of and how we proceed as it relates to diversity, inclusion, and cultural competency at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. So you'll be the first public group to see this. If you come to the Urban League's breakfast on tomorrow morning, it will also be shown, but I thought you guys were a better group. And so, can we preview this?
Believe deeply in diversity and inclusion. It's the right way to do business for our members, and it gives us a competitive advantage by intentionally creating a workforce that's reflective of the individuals we serve. Like anything worthwhile, our commitment is more than just words. We put our beliefs into action, and we've approached it in a disciplined way with measurable goals tied directly to executive compensation. Those goals include employee development and engagement, cultural awareness and competence, supplier relationships and community partnerships, and most importantly, they include our recruitment and hiring practices. Like any successful organization, we believe there's still plenty of work we can do, but we're committed to this cause and confident we're moving in the right direction.
I'm originally from Singapore. I left home when I was 18 years old, moved to the UK. I've traveled and lived in over 10 different countries.
I started at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee in 1983. I started in the mailroom.
In 2008, when I started my career here at Blue Cross, it was the first time I had an employer who provided domestic partner benefits.
My great-great-grandparents were slaves, and my grandparents, I am a descendant of a Memphis sanitation worker with a third-grade education, and my grandmother was a maid. So diversity every day is a part of my life. It is who I am.
Diversity and inclusion at Blue Cross means very simply that everyone is valued here, everyone is important, and everyone is respected and trusted and communicated with. They're part of the team.
We talk about the hard things when it comes to diversity. I really started talking about my Asperger's at Blue Cross in the last few months. We prefer to think of ourselves as neurodiverse. I'm from Rhode Island. We were a community. And it really didn't matter what church you went to, it didn't matter where you were from. If the barn burnt down, then we helped. If somebody got sick and bring their crops in, then we helped. Blue Cross is that kind of community, and it's one of the things that I think that makes us strong. And diversity supports that, because it doesn't really matter about all those other things, only that you're a good person and that you're part of our family.
I'm proud to be a part of this Memphis office because of the customers that we serve. When you think about Memphis, we have here it's 64% African American, and I think diversity is very important when you're talking about sitting down in front of a client to meet them where they are.
someone defined it once as diversity is going to the dance and inclusion is being asked to dance once you get there.
In 2012, we went to New York to get married, and I was nervous and anxious about submitting documentation to Blue Cross to change my last name. And much to my relief, within just a few days, everything had been processed, no questions asked. And it was so great knowing I could follow the policies that Blue Cross writes for all employees. There's not a special policy for me. I'm included just like everyone else.
I've worked in various different roles across multiple different organizations. This is probably one of the most diverse places that I've ever been in.
Everything that we do as far as diversity and inclusion is concerned is tied to our incentives. It's tied to our mission, peace of mind through better health. So when you think about diversity and inclusion from a leadership perspective, you have to lead by example. You gotta practice what you preach.
I've been with the company now for 8 years. Through the leadership that we have, they saw in me, and they saw that regardless of your age, regardless of your color, regardless of what you look like, their goal is to find the most qualified people to do the job that we do and to provide that voice of difference and also to try to find the similarity. And so that's where I am. That's how I got here.
We are a mature diversity and inclusion employer. I'm very proud of that. And my dream for the future is that I'll work myself out of a job. We take a lot of pride, not just in that video, but in who we are and how important diversity is to all the things that we do. And I know you share that sentiment. One of the things that I talk about probably more often than not for each organization that I get an opportunity to speak to is that you need to define diversity based on your organization. Some of the things that I find that organizations do, and it creates some complexities because everybody wants to define it in narrow terms, if you will, particularly around race and gender. And that is important, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. It is important, but let me tell you, suggest to you that when you start to talk about diversity and inclusion is that you embrace a definition that everyone in your organization can embrace. Diversity competency is important, and the way you define it is important because the way you define it is the way that you will illustrate it. The ability to understand a set of values and behaviors and attitudes and practices within an organization or a system that allows one to work effectively cross-culturally. Additionally, it refers to the ability to honor and respect the beliefs and language and interpersonal styles and behaviors of individuals. Cultural competency is something that I talk a lot more about today than I talk about diversity. And that was illustrated the other day. I was listening, and perhaps some of you saw this. I think the lady is the vice president of Apple, the vice president of diversity at Apple. Did anyone see this? It created a little backlash because she was speaking and she was trying to define diversity, and I thought she did it accurately. She said, you can have 12 white males with blue eyes and blonde hair, and you would still have diversity. I agree. But she didn't contextualize it, and it received a lot of backlash. And that's why I don't talk about diversity too much. I do talk about inclusion. And your theme today, my mic is not on. So I'm going to have to start over. But I thought she received some unfair backlash because it wasn't properly contextualized. David Lipscomb University. Have you followed that story? Interesting story, and I'll say this, I've been asked to speak at David Lipscomb for Martin Luther King Day, and I'd agreed to do that, and they had an issue with the president, and you know, sometimes you need to listen. They invited some students, Dr. Engel, to dinner. And they invited the African American students. And the centerpieces on the table were baled stalks of cotton. And the menu consisted of fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, and collard greens. Now, I like that menu, but I like to choose it myself. I really have a problem with you picking my menu, and that seemed to have been a major problem. And they contacted me the other day and asked if I would still come in light of the negative publicity that they're receiving. We're living in an environment that seems to be toxic. Where do we go after Charlottesville? Where do we go after Puerto Rico? Where do we go after NFL football games? You have a big job, because those same things that are impacting our society are impacting your university, at least in a microcosm kind of way. It's important. So cultural competency is important. Cultural competency includes, but is not limited to, race, sex, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, class, age, religion, and language. And one of the most important things I think is happening now, or should happen, is centered around culturally competent dialogue. Culturally competent dialogue, and that simply means we need to be able to sit down and talk to one another. We need to be able to sit down and look at one another, even if we have to make one another uncomfortable. It's important. It's just that important. Our country is being divided along so many lines that it's going to take the leadership of institutions like UTC to bring our communities back together. You have a big job. And so we've got to engage in culturally competent dialogue, and we have to suspend our right to become offended if indeed we're going to be effective. Let me repeat that, because I think that's vitally important. We will have to suspend our right to become offended if we're going to be effective in this work that we set out to do. Dr. Engel alluded to earlier, he mentioned very briefly demographics. Some of you know this, but I'd like to talk about it. If the world was a village of 100 people, if our world today could be reduced to a village of 100 people, with all other human ratios remaining exactly the same, our world would look a lot different than many of us think it would look. If we could reduce it to 100 people, it would look like this. 60 of those people would be Asian, 12 would be European, 5 would be Americans, 8 would be Latin Americans, 14 would be Africans, 1 would be a Pacific Islander, 51 would be female, 49 would be male, 82 would be non-white, 18 would be white, 89 would be heterosexual, 11 would be homosexuals, 33 would be Christian, 67 would be non-Christian, 21 would be Muslims, 15 would be Hindu, 6 would be Buddhist, 5 would be animists, 6 would believe in other religions, and 14 would be atheists. 15 would speak Chinese, Mandarin. 7 would speak English. 6 would speak Hindi. 6 would speak Spanish. 5 would speak Russian. 4 would speak Arabic. 3 would speak Bengali. And 3 would speak Portuguese. And the others would speak Indonesian, Japanese, German, French, and some other languages. 20 would be undernourished. 15 would be overweight. 1 would be dying from starvation. And 6 people would own 59% of the world's wealth. And all 6 would be from the United States of America. You have a big job. You have a big job. And so I applaud you for your efforts and your commitment to moving your campus forward. I think it's a worthy goal, but there are still significant obstacles facing you. Some of those on your university campuses throughout our country. First, there is an active drive towards social justice prompted by the need to recruit students and faculty and staff from groups that are historically and have historically been underrepresented in higher education due to issues of access to educational opportunities. There still exist dramatic emerging demographic changes that have increased the ethnic minority population needing educational opportunities to enable the growing community to fully engage in all aspects of society. And third, there is an increasing body of literature regarding our understanding and awareness of human differences, its richness and its complexity. I think you talked about that a little bit, Dr. Engel, because it is complex, and many times it's more than complex, it's complicated. And it's a promising indication, promising implication for the realization of enhanced learning and community building. You have a big job. So let me encourage and applaud you this morning on your conference goals of moving your campus forward. Dr. Samuels, in an inclusive and excellent manner. In an inclusive and excellent manner. And I realize, and you do too, that where UTC is now, where the students are now, and where you and they are headed is absolutely different, but it's of greater importance than where you or they have ever been. You see, this is the first time, and I'm saying this parenthetically, you have a big job because this is the first time in the history of America, for example, that you have all the generations in the same institution at the same time. And that creates a problem. Particularly with a group that we've designated as millennials, whoever they are. I would submit to you that one of the biggest problems you have and that our country has centered around communication, the way we talk to one another, the way we understand one another. We can ill afford to be corporately and culturally illiterate, even generationally. The communication styles have changed. And that's why I brought my favorite millennial with me today, April, because she knew there was no way I was going to get that video shown. And I understand that. Because our world is changing, and it's no longer changing at an evolutionary pace, which is a slow, gradual, naturistic change, but it's changing at a revolutionary pace, which is quick change. I see things now that I never thought I would see taking place in our society. And I submit to you that the young people that you're dealing with today on your campuses are some of the most honest, ethical, committed group of young people in the history of the world, bar none. And even when I look out at this audience and I see the young people, I'm comforted knowing that you are producing some of the best citizens that America has to offer. And I think that deserves a round of applause for these young people. You see, what's really important is where we're going and where you're going, and you have to move forward. You have a big job and some obstacles before you, but you need to just keep on moving. Keep moving in spite of the current divisive rhetoric that seems to bombard our society and our televisions and our community daily. Dr. King once said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. You see, this type of conference, this kind of dialogue is an important tool for creating the kinds of communities and academic environments where every person can feel valued and every person can thrive. So we've gathered here today to discuss and understand how our differences can make us stronger together. And I'm proud to work for Blue Cross. As you noticed on that video, I'm proud to work for Blue Cross, which is a company where diversity and inclusion are part of who we are. We've had a formal diversity program, if you will, a formal initiative for around 20 years. But here's my dream, as I stated there. I hope to work myself out of a job, and I think that's important because I want the values of diversity and inclusion and cultural competency to be so deeply embedded in our everyday rhythm of how we operate that we no longer need a formal diversity initiative. You will agree that building a culture like that is fundamentally the right thing to do. Every human being has equal dignity, and every human being has equal worth. It is our duty to honor that in the way we treat one another. Building a culture where that rings true is also the right thing to do for our schools, our businesses, our campuses, and our communities. Building a culture where that rings true is also the right thing to do to move your campus forward. It's the right thing to do for your administration. It's the right thing to do for your faculty. It's the right thing to do for your staff and students. And so no matter what type of business or service you're in, you have to meet the needs of your customers. And that takes understanding. But more importantly, it takes respect. And it's no wonder that research confirms making inclusion a priority as a way of building a competitive advantage. And again, let me parenthetically say that diversity and inclusion are not synonymous. You can have diversity and not have inclusion. And people use those interchangeably, but let me challenge you as leaders to understand that they are two different things, and the approach to them takes two different vehicles. They are not the same thing. And as we spend a few minutes together today, I'll share with you some ways at Blue Cross where we're continuing to work to move our company forward by building an inclusive workplace and building an inclusive culture and some success stories from along the way. But as I said to a number of you who were in the audience a few weeks ago, I also like to leave you with a question. Everywhere I speak, I like to leave you with a question. And that question is, what can you do today to honor the story and the differences of someone who doesn't look like you? Okay, let me do it again, because y'all didn't seem to be moved by that too much. What can you do today to honor the story and the differences of someone who doesn't look like you? And in order to do that, you have to be very honest with yourself. I was talking with the UT group, Dr. Noma, about a month ago. And I told you, I just met a guy who was being really interesting to me. He told me, I don't see color, Mr. Harris. I don't trust folk like that. So I don't see color. And I said, well, I really don't want to ride with you anywhere because there might be some traffic lights. And I'm going to need you to notice color. I'm going to need you to notice if I'm missing who needs to be on the milk carton. I'm going to need you to notice that. Somehow we have the idea that when we notice differences, physical differences, that we've created some type of violation. I'm speaking with a guy at work, and we became good friends over the years because he couldn't say black out loud. And he would say, Mr. Harris, you know, I have a couple of employees. And my employees, I said, we picked that color so you can say it out loud. Why do you say that, Ron? Because I think we get this thing wrong sometimes. You see, there's not much profundity in my skin tone. I didn't pick it. I was born with it. You didn't pick yours either. But the things that really matter, the things that really matter is the way we treat one another, our respect for one another, our trust for one another, the way we include one another, but more importantly, the way we communicate with one another. You see, when you don't see my color, you have invalidated me. You don't get to do that. When I don't notice that you're differently able and pretend I don't see it, I have invalidated an important part of you. When I don't respect your background, your experiences, and your exposures, I've invalidated who you are. So what can you do today to honor someone's story that's different from your story? Because we all have stories. And we all come with some baggage. And the only way we lighten that load is to admit that diversity exists. And it sounds so simple, but we seem to have a problem doing it. You noticed earlier I used the word story, and I want to assure you it was intentional. And that's another word that I often use, intentional. And when it comes to being inclusive, it doesn't just happen. You see, you're either going to be intentionally inclusive or you're going to be unintentionally exclusive. And that's an important feature. Let me do it again. You're either going to be intentionally inclusive or you're going to be unintentionally exclusive. It's important that we make up our minds to ask the question, what voice is not being heard? Who's not at the table? Because I submit if you're not at the table, you're on the table. We have to value each person. So let me just give you a thumbnail sketch of my story. And it started with Big Mama. Anybody know Big Mama? In Madea. Mine started with Big Mama. You see, I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in Spencer J. McCauley Homes. I got some alumni. Highland Avenue. I got some peeps. You need to throw an address out again. You can't raise your hand and say you grew up in the project without letting me know where. Say it again. 5938. I hear you. Yeah, I know that one. But you add to my story because I'm glad to see you here. You didn't allow someone's negative impression to become your reality. And so I applaud you for that. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for the admission. Most folks forget where they came from. But I want to say to you, I know that the roaches scatter when the lights come on. Nobody has to tell me that. I know that the roaches will run once you turn the light on. It's important. But Big Mama, because I was raised with a brother in Spencer J. McCauley home, I never recognized how poor I was because everybody around me were at that same socioeconomic level. And my grandmother always told me, you don't live in the projects. You live at 3469 Highland Avenue because the mailman doesn't deliver mail to the project. He delivers mail to an address. And don't you ever forget that you have an address. And no one's negative impression has to be your reality. And so I use that to catapult me and others like me beyond the stereotypical perception of a housing project. Because it was actually the first time I had my own bedroom. I felt like I'd moved to a condo. And that stuck with me. And so as I moved into Blue Cross and ascended to whatever level I've happened to ascend it to, one thing I know is that it's like the turtle on a fence post. And I don't care if you have, if you're a kindergarten dropout or you have a PhD in nuclear physics. One thing you know for sure, if you see a turtle on a fence post, you know it has some help getting there. Did not get there by itself. So I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing and moving this campus forward. Because on so many campuses around the nation now, when I speak, they talk about the minority students, talk about they don't feel a part of the campus. Faculty members say, I don't feel a part of the campus. I don't see people who look like me. I don't see people with my experiences. The administration has no idea how to communicate with me. And so you've made a big step forward. I applaud you for that, but keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, Dr. Engel, with your Multicultural Affairs Advisory Committee. I applaud you for that. I brag on that. I talk about that because I think it's just that important. See, because you're the feeder group for our employee base. You're the group that supplies us with those fine folk that you see on that video and of the 6,000 people who work at Blue Cross. So understand that I get up every morning and I want to come to work because I know our diversity efforts aren't just some program with a beginning and an end. They're part, and I thank you for saying that as well about your organization, they're part of our strategic plan. And they are part of delivering on our mission to provide peace of mind for better health for Tennesseans. And that makes what I do very exciting. And I hope you feel the same way about what you do. We are intentionally diverse and inclusive because it's the right way to do business for our members, and it gives us a competitive advantage by intentionally creating a workforce that's a reflection of the individuals we serve. And we have an incredible workforce. And so workforce, it's a great place to start when you start thinking about diversity in a business setting. And you are in a business setting. but I want to walk you through the ideal journey, and I'm going to do it briefly. I want to walk you through the ideal journey that will make your campus even more robust, and the journey from diversity through inclusion to cultural competency. I often share that someone, as you heard on the video, defined diversity as going to the dance, but inclusion is being asked to dance when you get there. I often share that it's important. Inclusion speaks to the idea of which voices are being heard. And then beyond inclusion is cultural competency. As I look around this audience, I see people from many different countries. I see people from all over the world, and UTC can ill afford to be culturally illiterate. Let me do it again. UTC can ill afford to be culturally incompetent. There was, I think it was McDonald's a few years ago that opened a chain of restaurants in India. It took them 13 months to figure out why hamburgers weren't moving. Cultural incompetence. Raise your hand if you're sure. Didn't do so well in Japan because they used an octopus to put on deodorant. They didn't realize that in Japan, octopus don't have arms, they have legs. I'll let you think about that with your own deodorant experience this morning. Gerber baby food didn't do too well in some parts of Africa because to combat illiteracy, they put a picture on the container of what's in the container. Go look at some Gerber baby food and you find one of the cutest little white babies on that bottle. Electrolux vacuum cleaners didn't do really well in America. Their motto is Electrolux sucks. You can ill afford to be culturally illiterate. You can no longer afford to think that one size fits all. So if you're going to move your campus forward, you're going to have to do it in a culturally competent way. One of the things that I'm most proud of at Blue Cross is that I'm not the only one who talks about diversity. If I were the only one doing the talking, I would consider myself a failure because it has to start at the top. Leadership has to cascade its message throughout the organization. Leaders have to lead. And if you call yourself a leader and no one's following you, you're not a leader. You're just out for a walk. Leaders lead. I like to recall one year we were getting ready to have Black History Month, and I mentioned this before, and I went to the meeting and there were no black folk in the meeting for Black History Month. I found that interesting. I said, there's got to be at least one black person on the committee for me to call it Black History Month. But you know, the realization, the reality was we had moved from it being a black employee event to a Blue Cross event. And so now, when we call the group together, everybody shows up. And it's a celebration, not of black employees, but of Blue Cross employees. We challenge you. One of the things that I hear on campus is that people don't recognize who I am. Wouldn't it be nice that if you took all the organizations, the student organizations, and once a year they came together with an event that benefited the community and the campus. Just one service event that every year, or once a year, all of those groups would come together to do something for the campus and the community it serves. Wouldn't that be nice? So as I look forward in the next couple of weeks to working with the business, your School of Business, with Dr. Batiste and my friend Sue Culpepper, as I look forward to those, having UTC students on our campus for an externship program that we're working with, and Yancey Freeman and that whole team has done a remarkable job. And our campus is excited about what you're going to bring in the next, I think it's 3 weeks from today. So we're excited about our partnership with you. But let me finish. Diversity is important. It's fundamental. But we have to have a broader definition. We've got to redefine it. We've got to move forward beyond race and gender. We've got to move forward beyond the barriers that confine us. And as your campus grows, and just like at Blue Cross, as our company grows, we are going to spend more time talking about diversity and recognizing and valuing differences. And we're going to go beyond all of those things that seem to separate us. It's important that we move beyond this divisiveness that exists in our society today. Move beyond, move forward, because we're all here together. We're here together, and we have more in common than we have in difference. We have more in common. And by a show of hands, let me show you how many water drinkers are there in the building today. Just raise your hand. How many air breathers? Just raise your hand. How many people want to be respected? How many people want to be trusted? How many people want to be communicated with? You see how much we have in common? And the things that divide us are the things that we have no control over, but we have control over the things that I just mentioned. And so as we move forward, let's remember that what's important is where you're going, not where you've been. And if we continue to focus on that premise, all of our lives will be richly blessed, and we will continue to become the people that God created us to become. Thank you. Q&A. Let me suspend anybody's right to become offended. So now that I've suspended that, we can ask questions about anybody. We can talk about anybody you want to talk about. Any questions?
Got an NFL question.
Okay.
It's dividing everybody even when it comes to my household. I want to boycott. My old man don't want to boycott. It's causing chaos. What should we just let it go, let politics be politics, and just go back to enjoying the game? That's what I say. He's like, on the other hand,
Her question was, I guess you all heard it, she was asking me about the goings-on in the NFL right now. I could do a whole 30 minutes on that because the situation has gotten hijacked. It was actually about social injustice, was what Mr. Kaepernick started his protest about, but somehow it morphed into a question of patriotism and those types of things. I think the First Amendment is a great amendment to have. We have the right to express ourselves, and you have the right to express yourself by watching the game or not watching the game or just enjoying the competition. You know, sometimes we have such a visceral reaction to that. I usually come in about halftime because I just want to enjoy the game. But I also understand, I'm a child of the 60s, and so I understand why, the whys of what's going on. But I choose to make my own, come to my own conclusions about it, so I don't spend a lot of time listening to the talking heads. I don't do that, and so make your own decision. And I know that's a cheap way out, but I think it's the right way out. I don't think the kneeling is an indictment of your patriotism. I don't think that. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can be concerned about social justice and be patriotic at the same time. And to some degree, I think that is patriotic.
Thank you.
If you had an hour in front of this group of students, what would you do to help them with their diversity competency within that 1 hour period?
I think if I had an hour to stand in front of students, I think I would do it. I spend about 65% of my time talking to young people, and I think we have done some things and said things to devalue them. I think we spent a lot of time talking about and listening to a few people who are outside, as I call it, the mainstream. But I think our young people, and I said it earlier and it bears repeating, I think I would say to them that when I look at you, I see the best that America has to offer, but I would also not inspire them, but inform them that their competition is not across the street. Their competition for success is not at Howard School, it's not at Brainerd School, it's not at Tyner, it's in China, it's in Russia. I would inform them that they are very important to the success of where our world is going. It's important, their voices are being heard. We shut them down too much too often. And as I tell the young people coming into the workforce, the average young person starting to work today was born in 1996. They were born that year. And it's a different world. But I tell them to keep asking that same old stupid question that they ask. And the stupid question that they ask is why? Keep asking it. Because we need to quit giving the stupid answer that we always give. And the stupid answer is cause. Challenge them and allow them to challenge you. Because I've discovered as an adult, I'm a lot smarter now than I used to be. I used to think I knew everything. But what I've discovered, if you find two people who know everything, you find out they know different things. Listen to our young people, encourage our young people. Don't be afraid of them. They're very gifted, they're very smart. We have over 1,200 people now who work from home. And I remember a young lady coming to my office years ago saying, why do I have to be here? I can do this little stuff from home. And we said, cause. And 6 or 7 years later, we have over 1,200 people working from home across about 17 different states. I think they're sharp, and I would tell them how valuable they are. That's what I would spend my time telling them. Because they're growing up in a world now that's moving like this. They are growing up in a world that, when I was growing up, there were two major cartoons. One was the Jetsons, and the other was like what was it? The Flintstones. And you know what? I go back and look at the Jetson cartoon. Do you realize that that's the world we live in Today, if you really want to learn how to teach them, let them watch the Jetsons. That's the world they live in today. And some of us are still living in the Flintstone world. I can't work this stuff. I have an iPad, an iPod, an iPhone, and they're just good-looking pieces of equipment. Because I don't tweet, I don't Facebook, I don't know how to Skype, I don't know how to do any of that. But I'm thankful that April does. And I say that only half facetiously, because she keeps me, and I'm going to say this publicly. Where is she? I'm going to say this publicly. She's a millennial, and she's one of the best hires and one of the best employees I've ever been around in my life. It was a little effort to start off with. Up to, and I got to tell this, you did this yesterday. So yesterday was Boss's Day, right? And so I get this mug in this nice bag, and I take the mug out. And she said, well, Reed, look at the mug. So I looked at it, and I said, thank you. And she said, no, read it. I said, I read it. She said, read it. It said, like the boss. And she just smiled. I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, you know, like on Facebook, like. I don't know what that means. You did that. I just wouldn't put some coffee in it and went back to being me. Because I don't understand that language. But I'm glad that I spend the amount of time around young people that I do. Because I don't have to know it. They know it. And it makes me very proud. As I said, I spend 65% of my time talking to young people. And, you know, at some point I'm going to pass the baton to her because I think it's just that important. And she said something that almost brought tears to my eyes. She said, thank you for being the type of boss that sends the elevator back down. Because she knew I believe in sending the elevator back down to our young people. That's important. That's important. Thank you. Any others? Y'all not asking tough questions.
In regards to your personal styles and behaviors, could you elaborate a little bit further on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about assimilation. And I don't really do assimilation really well. I like to look at integration because we bring our whole selves to work, and I bring who I am, and I come in with my background and the way I interact, the way I talk, the experiences that I bring. I try to deal with that person at their point and not at mine. I don't want people to be, and we don't want people at Blue Cross to just be this cookie cutter model. You are who you are. And that's why we spend a lot of time talking about cultural competency. Cultural competency. Who are you? I need to know that our Chinese employees have a saying, you know, and they talk to us about it when we do presentations before the workforce. So just an example, and this is an example. You don't see what appears to be a lot of ambitions, and one of the things that they try to inform our workforce is the nail that stands up gets hammered down. And I've got to understand that. I have to understand from an interaction standpoint, it's not a lack of ambition, but it's a cultural, I won't say prerogative, but it's part of the culture. And I have to understand that. I have to understand when I talk to our South Asian employees what they bring to the table from their culture. And so when we have cultural awareness sessions, I want to explode stereotypes. And I want them to tell us what's really important to them being effective in our workforce. and engaged in our workforce. So the first thing we did with our Indian employees, for example, I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell everybody what the dot means. And everybody got a little nervous. I said, if you sit there staring at it, you might as well know what it means. Right? Tell us about arranged marriages and tell us about cows. Make somebody uncomfortable. Do all Chinese people know karate? Do all black folk eat watermelon? Let's talk about that stuff. And then let's move on to doing the business of Blue Cross. Let's talk about, so we bring, and I heard you here, my good friend Deborah Levine. You see, Deborah does an incredible piece on going Southern. She came and did a presentation in one of our awareness sessions on Southern folk. Is that right? Because we are people from all over the world, and they didn't know what widget did you mean. They didn't really understand when people say, bless your heart. It wasn't a spiritual blessing. So Deborah came and did about a 2-hour session, and she has a great book on going Southern that really helped our workforce because there's some regional diversity as well. There are people in other parts of the country that think of a toboggan as a sled.
One of the things that I noticed that we're talking about diversity and inclusion is primarily within our institutions and how they function. But I think we missed an important component here. One of the things that keeps coming to mind is the whole idea of socioeconomic inequality and how that reinforces these challenges that we have with diversity and inclusion. So could you talk about how your institutions that can focus on socioeconomic inequality as a pathway toward diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the things that we do when we start talking about the socioeconomic status, because those are dimensions of diversity, and so we have a very robust supply of diversity program. We don't have set-asides, but talking about inclusion, we try to make sure that in our supply of diversity program that minorities are represented very significantly, women are represented, LGBT community is represented, veteran status, and the differently able have equal access to vendorships and to our supply diversity program. One of the things that we know is that people do have, that is a dimension. And those of us and some folk who are in highly compensated areas are so distant from those who aren't. There is a gap between the haves and the have-nots. And that does play a lot into the way we interact with people. And so it's important from our supply and diversity program is that we try to bridge some of those gaps by making sure, intentionally, that we are intentional in making sure that veterans, LGBT community, women, minorities, Asians, African Americans, Latinos, etc., are part of our diversity program. So who's doing the goods and services at Blue Cross is very important to us, and it's equally as important as any other component in our diversity initiative. Good question. Thank you so much.